We walk up to him, and he's sitting, and Don Jr. introduces me, and he says, Dad, this is Dave Rubin. He has a great podcast, blah, blah, blah. And Trump looks up, and he's like, I kind of recognize you. And I was like, oh, well, I go on Fox, I'm on Tucker a lot. He says, oh, Tucker, that must be it. And then he turns to you, and he goes, and who are you?
He goes, who are you? Because I'm just standing there, like, I don't know,
He goes, who are you? And you go, well, I'm his husband. And he goes, husband? Husband?
You two are married?
You two are married? And then he slaps his hands on the table.
Yeah.
And he goes, I want to stand up. I want to stand up and shake your hands. I think that's great. I think that's just
turns to
great.
Melania, he's like, honey, these two guys are married. And he turns to me, he's like, you guys are too good looking. That's your problem. You're too good looking. I'm going to mention somebody that you have to mention when you have conversations on camera in 2020.
Yeah.
President Donald J. Trump.
Oh, geez.
So I was thinking it could be interesting for us to share with these fine people our own personal story of meeting the president, because I don't think you've told this story, or have you?
I've only told this story, I think, once publicly, which was on Glenn Beck when I did the, what was it? It was Super Tuesday, which now feels like a lifetime ago. Remember when there was going to be an election? And he was asking me something about Trump, and I did tell this story. But basically, outside of Glenn's audience and some of our audience, nobody's heard this story. Right. And certainly nobody's heard it from your perspective, so it would be interesting to talk about. So we did meet the president.
Yeah.
So this was, I believe, on December 22nd of 2019, so just a
couple
months ago. Like well, it was either the 21st or 22nd, because I know that's the day I was speaking at this Turning Point
Even
summit.
That's, I mean, honestly,
I don't know why. Well, because I remember thinking it's the last sort of thing I'm going to do for the year.
I think it's these mushroom supplements that you take in the morning.
I do like those mushroom
supplements. I think your brain, you really, I'd say you take these like really good like brain supplements that are like, for focus and memory. I think it works.
Maybe it does.
Because if you had asked me the day, I would have been like, maybe December 5th.
Yeah. Well, I remember it was right before. It was right before Christmas.
December.
Yeah. Well, basically, I was giving a speech, and then it was announced like right the day before, or maybe even that morning, that Trump was going to speak, and so I spoke, and then they canceled a bunch of speakers, and then Trump spoke. So in effect, I ended up opening for him, which was kind of interesting. And after the event, Charlie Kirk messaged me and he said, "Oh, do you want to meet the president?" I said, "Let's do it." They asked for some info, and then we get on a short line of about 10 people. They throw us in a little booth. We meet the president. It's very in and out. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think we were standing in line with like Rob Smith.
Yeah.
And I was like the whole thing happened so quickly that I didn't even know the president was going to be there.
Yeah.
And we were like, how's this going to work? And then they took all of our phones. And they literally threw us in this tent with we call it a tent, but basically they like hung 4 curtains so nobody could see that he was there. And it was so fast that it was like they moved us in, and by the time you turned to like take the picture, they were turning you to also exit you out of this room.
Yeah, it was very seamless.
It was like you shake his hand, you had like a moment to say something to him, but it was like you turn and like they snap the photo like while you're moving around, and then you're out. And I was like, I don't even know where the camera was. And then we thought that was it. Like we met the president, we got a photo, who knows if we'll ever see this photo, and thinking that that's it. And then
So we have the photo, and then Trump speaks, and it was the first time we had ever heard him speak, which was just putting aside whatever you think about Trump. It was just super interesting to watch the way he works with the crowd.
Right.
And he's sort of doing stand-up
Well,
in a way.
it was like going to a stand-up show.
Yeah, and he's like he's off prompter, and he's on
going
prompter,
for laughs.
and
He's
going
getting the
for
laughs. They're
and,
feeding his...
Yeah. I know more about windmills than anybody. And
he's laughing with them like it's a joke.
Yeah. So, but putting all that aside, he speaks, and then afterwards we bumped into Don Jr., and he's become a good buddy of mine. And he said, "Would you and David like to join us for dinner tonight?"
Right.
Wait, I'm blanking on her name.
Kimberly Guilfoyle.
Kimberly
basically.
Guilfoyle. Yeah,
She was like, hey, like come over here, and she I guess knew about me through you, and she was like, we've got a table for the 4 of us. Can you join us? Are you free? And I was like, sure, okay.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go? And she's like, oh, at Mar-a-Lago. And I have to admit, I'm not as plugged into all this stuff, and that's intentional. But I'm not as plugged into all this stuff. Obviously, I've heard of Mar-a-Lago, but I do not know at this point what Mar-a-Lago is.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a hotel. I don't know if it's a restaurant. I don't know if it's a golf course. I come to learn it's basically
It's
all
like
of those
all
things
of that,
combined.
yeah.
But I really didn't know what it was. So when she said it was at Mar-a-Lago, I was like, oh, so it is a restaurant. But that just shows you how much I don't know about
Right.
that, it's part of Trump's world.
So fortunately, we had suits because we were supposed to go that night to an event that Ben Shapiro was
Right.
headlining, and we were supposed to be in suits
Sorry,
for that
Ben.
thing. Sorry, Ben. We left you to go see the president. We go to Mar-a-Lago. There's like an absolute insane security situation, and they have to like drive us around a small island.
Drive miles around this.
Yeah, it was like crazy to get in there. We get in there.
We're like basically almost strip searched before we're thrown in the back of a golf cart.
Yeah, like they really, well, it's the president,
Right.
you know? And then as you've described it, it's sort of like the Playboy Mansion, but like doused in gold
Right.
and hairspray. It's
Right.
sort of
Although
very,
it didn't feel cheesy at all. It actually,
no,
to
it
me,
felt
maybe,
kind
I
of
don't know if
classy
yeah.
or old school or something. And we go in, and there's a main dining room, and I'd say there were probably about 50 people in the main dining room, and Candace Owens was there,
Right.
and a couple other people that we sort of knew. And we were sort of whisked into the side room, which is, I guess, the more exclusive room where there's maybe 20 people.
Right.
And our table's right in the middle. Just,
There's like an extra layer of Secret Service just to get into that room.
right, and they make sure no phones, no pictures,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. Our table's like literally in the center of the room, so the four of us have a nice dinner, and sitting next to us, one table over, is President Trump and Melania and Rudy Giuliani,
Yep.
and they have two or three other people there. And we have a great dinner. We had a great time, right? Like totally fun. And Don doesn't drink, but
Right.
and one funny thing was happening that somehow the way we were sitting, I kept drinking your
You're drinking my
wine. So
wine.
basically, I had like 7
Yeah,
glasses
so
of
I was
wine,
like
and you
oddly
had like
sober by the end.
Yeah,
you
and
were
I
on-
was
and I couldn't
yeah.
figure out why until I realized what was happening. It's because you're a lefty, which
Oh, that's what it was.
if you see what I did here, actually today, because this isn't a real shoot,
Yeah.
I let you have your water on your left side. Normally, I make the water on that side, and then the
People say I
carafe
lost.
is over there.
They say I lost all my lefty cred. Look at that. Anyway, then at the end of the meal, Junior says, "Hey,
I'm
do
actually
you-
going to take some of your water.
go
right now.
crazy." Junior says, "Hey, do you want to meet my dad?" I was like, "All right, yeah, let's meet your dad." So we go up to him, and remember, this is like 2 or 3 days after impeachment had just been announced, which feels like another lifetime ago at this point. And every story was about Trump is freaking out,
He's freaking
the walls are
out.
closing in, he's a paranoid lunatic. The guy's sitting there, he had no tie on, he looked totally relaxed, his hair was a little more disheveled than usual. He was having a ball, he was laughing.
If you were living on the moon,
Yeah.
and you didn't know who Donald Trump was, and you didn't know who the President of the United States was, and all of a sudden you found yourself in this room, and they said to you, the President of the United States is in this room. Who do you think it is? I guarantee you, you would never think it was him.
Right.
This guy was sitting there pretty quiet
Yeah.
for the most of dinner, just listening to
Yeah, it
other
was-
people, listening to his wife speak, mostly actually. And I was expecting this like loud, bombastic blowhard sort of, like nothing even against him. It's just I think everyone can agree. Like you would think it would be the center of attention, sucking a lot of the energy out of the room. The exact opposite
Yeah,
experience.
it was the reverse. So we walk up to him, and he's sitting, and Don Jr. introduces me, and he says, "Dad, this is Dave Rubin. He has a great podcast, blah blah blah." And Trump looks up, and he's like, "You, I kind of recognize you." And I was like, "Oh well, I go on Fox. I'm on Tucker a lot." He says, "Oh, Tucker, that must be."
Yeah.
And then he turns to you, and he goes, "And who are you?"
He goes,
And
"Who are you?" 'Cause
and
I'm
you-
just standing there,
Yeah.
like I don't know,
He goes, "Who are you?" And you go, "Well, I'm his husband." And he goes, "Husband? Husband?
You two are married?
You two are married?" And then he slaps his hands on the table.
Yeah.
And he goes, "I want to stand up. I want to stand up and shake your hands. I think that's great. I think that's just
Turns to
great."
Melania, he's like, "Honey, these two guys are married." And he turns to me, he's like, you guys are too good looking. That's your problem. You're too good looking. And he's like, "Well, I got to shake your hand. That's fantastic. That's fantastic." And then he goes, "I don't give a shit." He goes, and I don't think anybody else does either. And then in a very Trump way. And also, I don't think anybody has for 20 years. No one's given a shit for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I realized at that point, I was like, oh, he thinks that I think he's probably a homophobe because I'm gay and that's what
Right.
I've been told by the media. But I'm in that moment, like, I knew already he wasn't a homophobe, so I'm not thinking that, but I realized how much does that suck for him to have to preface that after he meets a gay couple to say, I don't care, right? Like we're cool.
Right.
Um,
And then Melania was making eyes at you across
she
the
kept
table.
she was like talking to her family, they kept pointing at me. So you and Trump started talking about like Tulsi Gabbard and a couple other like policy
Yeah.
things.
Well, then Trump Jr. got kind of pulled away for a second. So then I'm there with Trump for like 5 minutes, and I'm
Right.
telling him about my crazy theories about
and
Mike
I just like,
Bloomberg
decided
and
to
some
leave
other
you
stuff.
and let you guys have a moment.
Yeah. And he was totally fun and interesting. And anyway, go
Yeah.
ahed. So then you and Melania.
So then I went over to Melania and I was like, hello. And she looks up and she was like, "How old are you?" In a very thick accent. "How old are you?" And I realized what happened was her and her friend were trying to figure out how old I was, and they thought I was too young to be in that room. So I said, "How old do you think I am?" And she was like, 20. And I was like, "No, I'm 31." And she was like, "Oh, you have beautiful skin." And so I was like, "Wow, thanks." And I was like, "So do you." And then we talked for a while actually about the friend that she was with, I think, had given money to Hillary's campaign, and it was just so interesting the people that were at this table.
Yeah, and then what actually the most interesting part was, which we discovered when we got into the car to leave, I said to you, what's standing out in your mind? And it was exactly what I saw, which was I said to Trump something about Bloomberg and why I thought he was getting into the race. And Trump turns to Melania. They're both sitting. We're standing. You're standing across the table, and I'm standing on this side. And he puts his hand on her arm, and he says, "Honey, what do you think about this?" And then he has me repeat my Bloomberg theory. And she was like, "Oh, that's really interesting. That's really interesting." But what was really interesting about it was that he turned to her, and the way he put his hand on her, and the way she responded, and "Honey, what do you think about this?" Like, they actually love each other.
It was so interesting to me because I was like, why haven't I seen this? Like, it was very clear. They in that room, they didn't have to put on a show for anybody. And I was like, these two people definitely like each other. Like, a lot. Like, they're in love.
His gut reaction when I said something interesting to him was, "Let me turn to my wife.
And see what she thinks first. Yeah. No, it was very interesting.
And so when we got in the car after, that's what I said, what was the thing that stood out in your
As
mind?
it should
And that's
be, by the
exactly
way.
what you
As
said.
it should
Well,
be, but it's just funny because, you know, I don't believe a lot of the lies about him, but that with my own eyes, I've seen it. Everyone's seen those like famous pictures or videos where she's a little bit, you know, skittish or standoffish from him. And I was like, I don't know, it's interesting.